This is my foster home where a lot of my suicide attempts happen. This is the carport where I tried to commit suicide, and obviously I'm still standing today. Yeah.
At age 12, Naila Wisa arrived at the South Auckland foster home carrying her only belongings, a jumper and a pair of trousers stuffed inside a supermarket plastic bag. She'd lived in more than 30 different foster homes in the preceding 3 years.
My upbringing was that my birth mother was raped at a young age, and of course there wasn't much help out there for her in it. With Pacific families, it's quite hard to deal with someone that's pregnant at a young age. So they didn't know how to deal with it, and instead they've shamed her. So of course she probably felt the same way, so I got the harsh part of it. So every day with my birth mother, she will say stuff like, I should have killed you before you were born, or I wish that you were never born because my life is miserable.
She says she was strangled with a jug cord, held underwater in the bath, and sexually abused while living with her family. Eventually, SIFs removed Naila from her family's care, but the constant shifting between foster homes that followed only added to her trauma.
There was a time where I was here, but they had to move me again because they had stuffed up again. When we moved in, it was only meant to be me, this lady, and the girl. But that night, it was her son was there, and he was much older than us, and his room was right next door to us. And I woke up and the girl that was with me, she had taken off. And I thought, oh, okay. And so then he comes into our room and he raped me. And then I took off and I came back here.
Naila's SIFs records detail how fragile she was during her time in foster care. Social workers repeatedly describe her as distressed and anxious and say they're concerned she's suicidal. But she says she barely received any mental health support.
I also had friends who committed suicide through care, and you look at it because you feel like that's your only option. When everything else around you, you're born into a family that didn't want you, you have friends who you're trying to please to love you, and then being moved around by so many homes, you think, man, there's nothing else. What else is there? So it's better not to have life. What's the point of having life when everything else you do is never good enough? Everything else you say is never right. Wherever you go, you're never wanted. So what's the point? That's the kind of mindset you have.
The Otara foster home where Naila made multiple suicide attempts lies in Counties Manukau, a district with high levels of mental distress. Last year, it had more kids in state care than any other district in New Zealand. Psychiatrist Dr. Siale Foliaki has worked on the front line of mental health services in Counties Manukau for more than 20 years.
The fact that more and more kids are ending up in foster care and state care is a reflection of a society that's under duress. The most complex children that I see are the kids that are in foster care. They have the most complex set of needs because they have the least stable environment to return to. And if you think about what causes us the stress, when we don't feel secure, and where do we get our security from? We get our security from strong attachment, strong relationships with primary caregivers in our family. And so if you remove a child from that, often when that family is not the best, clearly, otherwise they wouldn't have been removed. But it leaves them more vulnerable than other children.
He says being separated from your family, even an abusive one, is traumatic.
The challenge for a child is, though, their sense of identity and who they are is always wrapped up in their family. And so the child is always wanting to reintegrate or re-establish contact with their parents and have a relationship with their parents. And often it means that they go through an incredibly difficult time emotionally. And so a lot of kids go from placement to placement to placement because they're so distressed, and a particular caregiver can't manage them. But each placement breakdown is another trauma that the kid has to go through. So I see kids in state care that just get trauma upon trauma, and it leaves them really emotionally incredibly fragile.
Paora Crawford-Moyle has been a social worker for nearly 3 decades and is an advocate for people who've been in state care. Her memories of the 14 years she spent in care with her 2 younger brothers are still vivid.
The last thing my dad ever said to me when he left us was, Paora, make sure that you look after the boys. And I took that to mean that was my job. That's what I had to do. And I was 5 years old. That was my job. That's what I had to do. So when I couldn't do that, my mental health, my well-being, suffered terribly, because it's almost like I could handle the harm happening to myself, but when my baby brothers were being harmed, and they're behind a door that I can't get to because I'm too little to open the handle, and I can hear them crying, that is something that stays with you for a lifetime. You asked me about my mental health. I know that I suffered, that they suffered.
The government's mental health inquiry report released last week said many submissions highlighted how childhood trauma was the origin of mental distress and addiction.
So many questions flooding a little brain. What's happening? Why is this happening? I must have done something to make mummy and daddy unhappy. Why are these people coming to take us? What did we do wrong? See, when you're little, children often think that the world revolves around them, and that there's something that they've done to cause the bad things to happen. But I believed my dad when he said to me, keep your bags packed, I'll come back and get you. I held on to that promise for very many years. I always had my bag packed in case my papa came back to get us.
The Mental Health Inquiry report also noted that state agencies such as Oranga Tamariki could exacerbate trauma. But despite this, the inquiry offered no specific recommendations for how to support children in care.
It takes a lot of trauma, and sometimes intergenerational trauma, to cause children to give up. So for me, the option of leaving the world was always prevalent. We don't have a lot of understanding in social work about how trauma, intergenerational trauma particularly, impacts children. We know a lot of our children in state care have experienced suicidal ideation or whakamomori, the varying stages of deep depression.
We asked Oranga Tamariki how many children had attempted suicide while in its care and how many had reported mental health issues over a certain period. The ministry refused to supply figures because of the work that would be involved. It said it couldn't provide the information because it had never collated the data.
The fact that they've never had kept records of that information, does that concern you at all?
Yeah, absolutely it concerns me. And I know that Oranga Tamariki has come into existence and their principal philosophical position now, compared to the old Child, Youth and Family Services, is to absolutely place the child in the centre of care. And if you place the child in the centre of care, that sort of information should be known. Yeah, I think it's a failing of the system to not be able to identify and not to have that type of record so that we could analyse whether or not what we do now is better than what we've done before and think about a baseline towards the future. If we change the way, if we think we can do it better, then you should see a reduction in those types of statistics going forward. But how can you make those comparisons if you don't have that information?
You don't know where you're starting from.
You don't know where you're starting.
The ministry's response came as no surprise to Paora Crawford Moyle.
But it's always been a poor system of collating really key facts and figures and statistical information that would help inform us of what we're getting right and where some things are going wrong. I actually think that a lot of key information isn't collated, and that's what you've found, because it reveals too much, and it would be too hard for the Oranga Tamariki, child, youth and family, whatever name you put on it, for the system to actually explain.
What kind of a picture do you think that would paint if those statistics were collated?
I think we need to get brave and actually put the real figures onto the table and have a good look at this. This is about our children.
Oranga Tamariki says it refers children in care with mental health issues to the appropriate services in the community. But Ms Moyle says that's just rhetoric.
Is the ministry doing enough to support the mental health of children in their care?
I think that there are generic services that children are referred to, but I hear children saying to me, actually it goes right over my head, nobody's listening to me. We hear lots of lovely rhetoric that children's voices are the most important, that we're listening to them, we're being informed about how we do things differently, how we do things better. I'm telling you, there are a lot of children that are not being heard, and there's still those stories and experiences that we're choosing to ignore, that we're choosing to cover up, and they're not coming out into the light of day. It's not okay to listen to all the lovely stuff and not really take responsibility for some of the shit practice that is actually happening at a frontline level.
We called many different helplines and services to try to find specialised help for children in care.
Hello, Lifeline.
Hello, this is Tatoko. Hello, this is Youthline. You're speaking.
Good afternoon, Youth Horizons.
Hello, this is Kidsline.
Not one of the services we called was able to direct us to where a child in foster care could go to for mental health support.
Oh, I'm not sure about that. No, we don't. We don't sort of provide that sort of thing. I think that
Oranga Tamariki says while it doesn't collate information on the number of suicide attempts or mental health issues reported by children in its care, it does record that information on each individual file under behavioural attributes. Paora says even the language points to the ministry's incompetency.
Here's what I think. I don't think that the mental health and well-being of children inside child protection, Oranga Tamariki, are being catered for. I don't think that we have the expertise. We have a lot of incompetence.
If there's anything that you could say to the government in terms of demanding change in this ministry, what would it be?
Stop protecting your own ass. Stop protecting what you didn't get right. Get brave and actually have a look at what we're doing to children in care.
Mo te hōtaka o te ahipone ko Indira Stewart aho.